After the rain stops, the sky often grows quiet. The clouds thin. Light returns gently, not with force, but with patience. And sometimes, stretching from one horizon to another, a bow of color appears. It does not speak, yet it says something deep to the human heart. It feels like a message, a reassurance, a moment where heaven seems closer than before. Long before modern science explained refraction and light, Scripture already treated the rainbow not as an accident of nature, but as a sign placed deliberately by God, carrying memory, meaning, and promise. Why does God choose a rainbow? Why a bow, arched across the sky? Why does this sign appear after judgment and not before? And why does Scripture return to this image again and again, from the days of Noah to the visions of the prophets and the final pages of Revelation? These are not merely poetic questions. They are invitations to slow down and read carefully, to let the text speak in its own rhythm, and to encounter God not only as judge, but as covenant maker. This is Bible Scope, your place to find light, find truth, and find purpose. If this journey speaks to your heart, like the video and subscribe to walk through Scripture with us. We begin where Scripture itself places the sign of the bow, in the quiet aftermath of the flood. Genesis chapters 6 through 8 describe a world overwhelmed by water, a creation returning to something like its primordial state. The earth, once ordered and filled with life, is covered again by the deep. The flood narrative is not rushed. It unfolds slowly, emphasizing waiting, endurance, and obedience. Noah does not escape judgment. He passes through it. He is carried by God's instruction, not by his own strength. When the waters finally recede, the first thing Noah does is worship. He builds an altar. He offers sacrifice. This moment matters. The covenant of the rainbow does not appear in a vacuum. It comes after obedience, after patience, after loss, and after gratitude. God responds to Noah's offering with words that reach far beyond one family. He speaks to all future generations. God promises never again to destroy all flesh with a flood. He establishes a covenant not only with Noah, but with his descendants, and strikingly, with every living creature. The covenant of the bow is cosmic in scope. It includes animals, birds, and the earth itself. This tells us immediately that God's concern is not limited to humanity alone. Creation matters to him. Creation remembers. Then God says something unusual. He says that he sets his bow in the clouds, and that it shall be a sign of the covenant between him and the earth. The Hebrew word used here for bow is the same word commonly used for a weapon of war, an archer's bow. This detail is easy to miss, but it is essential. In the ancient world, a bow was not decorative. It was an instrument of power, judgment, and authority. That be why placing his bow in the sky. God is not simply painting colors. He is performing a symbolic action. A warrior who hangs up his bow is signaling the end of battle. The bow is no longer aimed at the earth. It is turned upward, away from humanity. Judgment has been restrained. Mercy has spoken. This understanding becomes even clearer when we notice the direction of the bow. A rainbow does not point downward. It arches upward. Its curve faces the heavens. The imagery suggests that if the bow were ever to be drawn again, it would not be aimed at the earth. The sign itself embodies restraint. God binds himself by his own promise. Scripture tells us that the bow is also a reminder for God. This is a deeply humbling idea. God says that when he sees the bow in the clouds, he will remember his covenant. This does not imply forgetfulness on God's part, but relational faithfulness. God chooses to work within signs and memory, not because he needs them, but because we do. He enters in a covenant in a way that speaks to human experience, that in the ancient Near Eastern world, covenants were often sealed with visible signs. Stones, sacrifices, marks, and rituals served as witnesses. The rainbow functions in this way, but with a crucial difference. Human covenants depend on mutual enforcement. God's covenant here is unilateral. He does not say, "If you obey, I will restrain judgment." He simply promises, This tells us something essential about God's character. His mercy precedes human reliability. When we widen our lens beyond Genesis, we begin to see how powerful the image of the bow truly is. In ancient cultures surrounding Israel, floods and cosmic chaos were often attributed to capricious gods. Divine anger could erupt without warning. There was no assurance of stability. Against this background, the biblical covenant stands apart. The God of Scripture binds himself to order, to consistency, to patience. The rainbow, then, is not merely a pretty ending to a storm. It is a theological statement. The world is not at the mercy of divine mood. History is not random. Judgment has limits, and mercy has memory. As we continue reading Scripture, the imagery of the bow does not disappear. It transforms. In the prophetic books, God is often described using martial imagery. His arrows are sharp. His bow is bent. These images communicate authority and justice, yet they always operate within covenant. God's judgment is never arbitrary. It is purposeful, measured, and ultimately restorative. The book of Ezekiel offers one of the most striking reappearances of rainbow imagery. In Ezekiel chapter 1, the prophet describes a vision of God's glory. The language is dense, symbolic, and overwhelming. Wheels within wheels, fire and light, living creatures. And then Ezekiel says that the appearance of the brightness around God was like the appearance of the bow in the clouds on a rainy day. This connection is intentional. The prophet sees the same sign that appeared after the flood, now surrounding the throne of God. Glory and covenant are intertwined. Judgment and mercy are not opposites. They are held together within God's character. Even in a vision of overwhelming power, the bow appears as a reminder of promise. When we reach the final book of Scripture, the image appears again. In Revelation chapter 4, John describes a throne in heaven, and around the throne is a rainbow that looks like an emerald. Once more, the bow frames divine authority. The throne is not naked power. It is covenantal power. The God who judges is the God who remembers mercy. This repeated use of the bow across Scripture reveals a pattern. The rainbow is not locked in the past. It stretches from Genesis to Revelation. It binds the story of Scripture together. Creation, judgment, covenant, and restoration are all held within its arc. What does this reveal about humanity? It reveals our deep need for assurance. After catastrophe, we ask whether life can continue. After judgment, we wonder whether hope remains. The rainbow answers not with words, but with presence. It appears quietly. It does not demand attention. Yet once seen, it is difficult to forget. The covenant of the bow also teaches us something about how God communicates. He does not rely only on spoken law. He uses creation itself as a sign. The natural world becomes a bearer of meaning. Every rainbow is a sermon without words, reminding the world that mercy still stands. For the original audience of Genesis, this mattered deeply. Floods were a constant threat in the ancient world. Rivers brought life, but they also brought destruction. To live under the promise that God had set a boundary, that waters would not again erase all life, was to live with a new sense of stability. The world was no longer only dangerous, it was dependable. Yet the covenant of the rainbow does not eliminate judgment entirely. It limits it. God promises not to destroy all flesh by flood, but he does not promise that evil will go unchecked. This balance is crucial. Mercy does not mean indifference. Judgment does not mean abandonment. The bow holds these realities together. As readers today, we may be tempted to see the rainbow only through modern lenses. Culture has attached many meanings to it. Some are hopeful, some are contested. Scripture does not ask us to ignore these realities, but it does ask us to return to the text. The biblical meaning of the rainbow begins with God's initiative, not human symbolism. Read Genesis carefully is to see that the rainbow is not a sign of human progress or moral achievement. It appears after failure, after violence, after grief. It is God's response to human brokenness, not humanity's solution to it. This matters for our spiritual life. Hope grounded in God's promise is different from hope grounded in human effort. The covenant of the bow also invites personal reflection. Many of us know what it is like to live after a storm. Loss, regret, and fear can linger even when danger has passed. The rainbow does not erase the memory of the flood. It stands over it. It allows memory to exist without despair. In this way, the sign of the bow teaches us how God redeems history. He does not pretend judgment never happened. He places promise above it. He transforms memory into meaning. When Jesus speaks of the days of Noah, he does so not to inspire fear, but awareness. He reminds his listeners that life continued after judgment. People planted, built, and lived. The covenant endured. God remained faithful. The rainbow, though not mentioned explicitly by Jesus, remains part of that inherited memory. As we walk through Scripture attentively, we begin to see that God's covenants always move outward. From Noah to Abraham, from Israel to the nations, from the cross to the new creation. The bow appears early, not as the final word, but as the first great assurance that God's relationship with creation is grounded in mercy. This also shapes how we understand the end of the story. Revelation's visions of judgment are framed by covenant imagery. The rainbow around the throne reminds us that even the final acts of God are consistent with his promises. The same God who restrained his bow after the flood is the God who will ultimately reconcile all things. That to sit with this image slowly is to let Scripture reshape our instincts. When we see the rainbow in the sky, we are invited not to rush past it, not to reduce it to explanation or debate, but to remember. Remember that God chooses faithfulness. Remember that creation is held, not abandoned. Remember that judgment serves restoration, not destruction. As we close this journey through the pages of Scripture, the sign of the bow remains above us, quietly spanning past and future. It reminds us that God speaks not only in thunder, but in light, not only in command, but in promise, and not only to humanity, but to all that he has made. As we've walked through this passage, what truth stood out to you? How might it shape the way you live today? If this exploration helped you grow, like the video and subscribe. Your journey through the pages is just beginning.